لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، وقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون، ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم وليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. For a second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to the master of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Tonight marks the night in which we commemorate the martyrdom, it's fair to say martyrdom, of the young daughter of Imam Hussain. One of the important questions that comes about because of this commemoration and the realization that this event actually took place in history is the discussion about how could something so bad happen to an innocent child? And the reality of understanding this is not a straightforward question that can be answered in a statement or a phrase, but rather something we have to ponder over and understand. That on its apparent nature, it seems inappropriate, it seems wrong. How could a child go through such masa'ib? Is Allah not just? Is Allah not fair? When we look at questions like this, and we see difficulties that befall us in our day-to-day life, or we see someone who we feel is not worthy of the difficulty that they're facing, it can put our entire faith into question that how could Allah allow this to happen? But the nizam of Allah, the order of Allah, when it's thought about and understood, is perfect in its example. Which is why to answer such a question, we have to break down and have a discussion in three parts to try and understand how can this be a reality that someone innocent suffers. The first of these questions that we'll take a look at is why do bad things happen? And then the second, why do bad things happen to good people? Then we can break down and understand why could a bad thing happen to an innocent child. And from this, inshallah, we hope to derive and understand and reaffirm our affiliation that when we believe Allah is just and good, that if such an event occurs, that we can come to the conclusion that was come to by our teacher of Karbala, Sayyidah Zainab Salamullahi alayha. She says, I did not see but beauty. So inshallah, with these 3 points, we'll have a conversation on understanding this topic with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Stay awake to get to the conclusion. If you lose me in the middle, you make me lose the topic, so don't get lost. Stay with me. When we begin our discussion, why do bad things happen? The fundamental of something that we call bad, there are two categories of events that can be considered bad. One is that category that is a natural event or a natural occurrence that exists, for example, an earthquake, a tsunami, a hurricane that we consider to be a bad event. The other is that which is caused by man, which is considered bad. When it comes to this first category of understanding a bad thing that we call and look at, for example, a natural disaster, whether that be the event of a tsunami that can take thousands of lives in one instance, or a hurricane, or an earthquake, any of these natural events that exist, we consider them to be bad, and we consider them to be that why would God do this to people? This is one category of a bad event. When we try to understand this category of a bad event, we take a look at natural occurrences that happen, and we realize that the natural occurrence happens all over the place all the time. There are hundreds of earthquakes that happen every day. But we don't get upset about those earthquakes. We're fine with it. What happens is when a natural event conflicts with the interest of man, then it becomes bad. For example, I show you a video of a tornado. MashaAllah, beautiful. I put a tornado in your backyard. Then tell me if it's beautiful. I show you a video of a shark. Majestic, beautiful, Shark Week, it's a beautiful thing. We love to see these sharks. I put you in a body of water with a shark next to you. Then tell me if it's good. Everybody agrees, bees are very important. Let me lock you in a car with a bee. Then tell me if you agree if it's a good thing. When it comes to these natural occurrences, our considering them to be bad is not the fact that they exist that they're bad. Rather, we can acknowledge that its existence is beneficial to the earth to keep balance and order in the existence that happens in reality. We need all of these things. They have to exist. They're beneficial to the earth. The problem is when it comes in conflict with the interest of man. That when man is negatively affected, then it's a bad thing. Then it's a disaster. Then it's hard. We recognize and we understand the tectonic plates moving on the earth settling and shifting is a natural process by which that the earth exists, that these continents that we take a look at, this world that we live in, all these elements, we need these events to happen for this earth to exist and to maintain balance for humanity to live. The problem is I built a city on a fault. I built a city on the break. Not that the break shifted and said, people live here, let me come here. No, our complaint and argument with what we call to be bad and a disaster is that now my interest is affected by what exists in nature. Not that nature itself is bad. So when we look at this, the first thing that we say is that, is it a bad thing that it happened, or is it simply a conflict that occurred that was naturally going to happen, and I was unfortunately affected by it? When we look at the earth and its existence, we can see that the earth needs to persist. It needs to maintain balance, and it maintains balance by adapting and adjusting and changing to ensure that this earth is habitable for humanity as a whole. Sometimes it may happen that as the earth observes its normal behavior, that humanity is negatively affected. Can we say it's bad? It's a reality that exists. And that should I be negatively affected, it can be unfortunate for me, but can I say that the item itself is bad? No, I can't make that argument. The second category of actions that are considered bad is those actions that are initiated by man, and man suffers the negative consequence for it. War, for example. Murder, for example. Car accidents, for example. All of these elements create an environment where I did nothing wrong, I didn't do anything bad, necessarily, yet here I am suffering through the difficulty that's happening to me, caused by another human being violating my rights and violating my freedom. When we look at this, this is an element that we can say is bad. But we have to look at it and see, does that mean that Allah intended for this evil to exist? Is Allah making this happen? Is Allah doing this action to me? To understand this, to say that Allah should stop this process, our reaction is this: it's a bad thing that humanity kills humanity. War happens between society. People suffer through difficulty. The reaction is, why does Allah not stop it? Why does Allah allow it to exist? To understand this, let's start with a micro scale and then make the macro. You guys are okay, right? If I lose you, you're gonna get lost, so stay with me, all right? Cars, are they good or bad?
Good.
Could be good or bad, right? I used to make this joke when I was little, that I was like, when I'm driving, everyone who's walking, their life is in my hands. That car itself is neither good nor bad. It is an element and tool that I can utilize to either get from home to work, or I can utilize it to now do an evil action with. Or I can go so far as I can use that car and do something good that earns me thawab, that I come to a majlis. And that action that was mubah, meaning it could have been good, could have been bad, can shift along the spectrum from something bad to something innocuous, serves no purpose one way or another, or to something that's good and rewarded with Allah. The object itself, its existence, is not evil, but it is an element that can be utilized by man to perform an action. When Allah created humanity, He gave us a variety of tools and He gave us a variety of responsibilities of how we may execute with them, that you can use them for something good, you can use them for something that is neither good nor bad, or you can use them for something evil. Now let's say this car example that we have. Cars, most of us, we do good things with them. Many people do not think the way I thought as a child. And even I don't think that way anymore, that when I drive, people's lives are in my hand. The car itself, if we were to take a look at it today, and say that within humanity, within the drivers of vehicles, licensed participants of the driving community, most people do good things with this car. But every so often somebody gets a bad idea and decides to use this car inappropriately. The question would be, should we turn around and abolish the use of cars for all of humanity because some people do something bad with it? We say, no, Sheikh, that's an overreaction. That's an exaggeration. Instead, why don't we create policies and procedures that if you do something bad with it, you'll be punished for it? Which is why the code of law exists that says that if you decide to take other people's lives into your hands when you're driving a car, you'll be punished for it. We didn't turn around and say that, cars should not exist, and the existence of cars itself is a bala and a difficulty. We said no, that some people abused it, but the abuse does not merit the destruction of the system entirely. Understanding this on a micro scale, where we can see and logically interpret and understand this, now we turn back to the macro scale. Allah created humanity with free will. The purpose of this free will was to allow humanity to live its life and to come to the conclusion to worship Allah and to do good deeds with its own discretion and intellect in source. This free will is what made humanity ashraf al-makhluqat, the best of Allah's creation. Why? That with the challenges that Allah wrapped around this free will by incorporating both the desires and the emotions as well as the intellect in humanity, and giving humanity the freedom to balance between these challenges, made man the best of Allah's creation. His malaika possess an intellect, but no emotion. So when Allah commands them, they don't have any doubts or any desires to say, I don't want. They simply look at Allah's command and execute. And Allah gave us animals, haywanat, who simply have desire and needs, but no intellect. And they fulfill their desire and their intellect however they wanted to. But when Allah accompanied both of these into man and gave him the free will to execute, man became the best of human beings. Why? Because when he chooses to do worship of Allah, he overcomes his desires that the malaika didn't possess and uses his intellect and worships Allah. But when he turns around and ignores his intellect and focuses on his desires only, he turns around and becomes worse than even the animals. This free will became our most honorable attribute that we possess. When we look at humanity as an entirety, do we see that every human being abuses free will and causes harm to society? No. We say a few of them do. A few of them turn around, they cause shar, they cause evil, they cause disasters about humanity. Does their evil action justify that Allah should take away the free will from all of humanity? No. Rather, what was the implementation that Allah did? Is He implemented and set rules and guidelines that warned us that if you use this free will as evil, I will punish you for it. So truthfully, when we take a look at a person who causes war, who causes strife, who causes harm, who abuses that system of free will, and we say that Allah should not allow this person to have this ability to do this action, we're saying, oh Allah, why did you give us free will? Why did you allow humanity to have the ability to do good and evil? The same way we would question with a car. Why did cars exist? Not the movie, we're not talking about that. Focusing on the concept. And we would say that that's a bad question to ask. Rather, the abuse of the system does not merit the destruction of the system. So when we look at something that looks like it's bad in general, whether it's something that's a natural event that occurs, or two, it's a consequence of humanity abusing the system of free will, we would say that the reality of this event existing is not bad within itself, but it's an abuse of a system sometimes. And sometimes it's a natural occurrence. That truly, can we say that the existence of free will is bad? So we're abused, but it's not bad. So first the characteristic, does something bad exist? We can put that to the question that no, it's a consequence of reality existing that these events take place. The second point of our discussion, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Why do bad things happen to mu'mineen? Shouldn't it be that I believe in Allah, so I should be immune to all of these challenges and difficulties? That as soon as I've said La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Ali and Waliullah, all of this goes away. And I'm immune to the challenges of life. I have become that one who has ascended beyond these issues. Rather, take a look and see what Allah says in the Quran, the verses of Quran that we began our discussion with in Surah Al-Kabut. Surah Al-Kabut, the second and third verse. Allah takes this concept that man may possess in his mind that, why should bad things happen to me? I claimed Islam. I claim the faith of Allah. Why should I go through a challenge and difficulty? Allah asks the question, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ, does mankind think, أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ? Does man think that they will say that they have faith and that will be enough from them, that they won't be tested? وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, and we tested those who came before them. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَاذِبِينَ. Allah says that we tested those who came before you, so that we would know who was truthful in their claim to faith and who was a liar. Allah is telling us that if you're someone who claims faith, it doesn't mean you're not going to get a test. It means you're definitely going to get a test. You have to go to the test. See, this is where and this is an important element. This is one point. If you focus on this one point, it can solve many of your difficulties. Western society has presented us a mirage that this world should be like heaven. This world is heaven. This world is not heaven. This world was created with a purpose. Its purpose was to test us if we deserve to go to heaven or not. So why do you think that your life should be easy here? Logically, if my life is easy here, did I earn a reward in the hereafter? Or to earn the reward in the hereafter, I have to go through a test in this life. This is why Allah is telling us, did you imagine it was enough that you would say your faith? No, you have to be tested. Because tomorrow you will stand in front of Allah and demand a reward from Him. And you will say, oh Allah, I want to go there, I don't want to go there. When you want to go there, the next logical question is, what did you do to deserve to go there? What did you do to deserve to go to this heaven? So Allah established the ground to prove, to see, are you truthful in your claim that you deserve to go there, you believe in Allah, or are you a liar? The reality that there exists something after this life, and that this isn't heaven, is very clearly established by the example of understanding the consequences that exist in this world. The consequence to action is incomplete in this world. Shall I give you an example? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You kill 1 million people. I want to punish you. How many times can I kill? You save 1 million people. Can I even add 1 day to your life for saving a person? Can I compensate you fairly for the good that you've done? Can I compensate you fairly for the evil that you've done in this life? It's impossible. That alone should tell us that this world is not heaven. This world is not hell. No. Because there's no equity in compensation for the good that you do, nor for the evil that you do. Allah has established that there has to be a place where every iota of good that you do is compensated for, and every iota of evil that you do is compensated. It doesn't exist in this life. So therefore, the person who has faith, hadith on top of hadith, the idea here is that the intellect should be satisfied of what actually exists and doesn't exist. If we were to look at a riwayah, we would see riwayah on top of riwayah, where we see our sixth Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq Bala and difficulties come to a believer the way water collects at a drain. Think of any sink, any bathtub, anywhere where you build a drain. The physics of that drain is that wherever I pour water, the first place it should go is the drain. We would say it's inappropriate, or it's a bad tub, or it's a bad object that collects water and has a drain, but the water doesn't immediately come to the drain. The same way the Imam is explaining that if you want to profess Iman, you will go through difficulties in such a way that you will be the first one to go through difficulties because you are the most likely to receive the reward. The Imam goes so far as to say that a mu'min is one who does not go 40 days without some difficulty befalling him, whether in his health, whether in his wealth, whether in his family, whether in his environment, anywhere and everywhere that he will go through difficulties. Let's go even a step further than that. And what happens if you don't go through a difficulty every 40 days? The Imam says, then believe that Allah has turned His attention away from you. Why? Allah is just. He's not going to torture you in this life and then torture you in the hereafter as well. He's going to give you istiraha. He's going to give you comfort needs. Enjoy it now so that you have something that's worthy of being punished for in the hereafter. So when we take a look at the idea that why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to the believers? The reality is that the believer is the one who is most likely to go to heaven. How do you go to heaven? You have to pass the exam first to be able to deserve going to heaven. This life is not heaven. This is the test. Think of it this way. Nowadays, when you take, for example, these graduate level exams, they're done on computers. Humanity has developed a process of understanding that to establish and understand what's the actual level of a person. Do they actually deserve to pass this exam or not? You sit down to the exam at a computer. You answer the first question. You get it right. What happens to the second question? It gets harder. You answer the second question right, got harder. Third question right, harder. You get the fourth question wrong, what happens? It gets easier. Apply the same principle to this life. Same principle exists in reality. If man has the intellectual ability to determine, to correctly measure where a person's caliber is, then you ask them questions and make it right. If it's right, it gets harder. If it's wrong, it gets easier. Now establish the same principle to your life and understand how Allah built His system. You want to profess Iman? Good, harder. You want to enact your faith? Good, harder. You want to practice good deeds? Harder. You want to commit a sin? Easier. You want to commit more sin? Easier. You want to neglect your faith? Go ahead, no exam for you anymore. There's no benefit. Our reality is to understand that these trials that we face, instead of asking the question, why me? It's a bad question. You go through a difficulty, our immediate reaction is, why me? What did I do to deserve this? But you said you're a Muslim. Why are you surprised now? You said you want to have Iman. You said you want to go to heaven. If I exchanged with you and I said to you that through each of these challenges, you're earning a status in heaven, if I could have that perspective, would you ever ask the question, why me? Or would you say, Alhamdulillah, who gave me something difficult in this life, but gave me a great ease forever? This is what our perspective, this is what Islam teaches us. Our society teaches us you should work in life only until you can get comfortable. And once you're comfortable, once you have enough, then just relax, Baba, enjoy. Who wants to, is that the lifestyle that's going to get you into heaven? Is that going to do anything to achieve our goal? No. Which brings us to that second point in conclusion, that are these bad things truly bad things? Or is it the reality that Allah said you professed faith? Now prove you have faith. How do you prove you have faith? Go through the tribulation. This entire principle and concept is not something that only I'm telling you, but rather Allah has proven through history. How? Look at the seerah of the Anbiya and the A'immah. The best of humanity. The best in knowledge and character and akhlaq. Was their life easy? Was their life comfortable? Is there a Nabi who didn't go through a trial? Is there an Imam who didn't go through? If Allah is showing you the masa'ib of showing the best of humanity and showing that they go through difficulties much harder than we go through, then why am I asking the question, why me, when I face a difficulty? It should be that the harder the difficulty that I face, the more thankful I am that Allah brought me closer and closer to His ideal examples on this earth. And Nabi and Imam is the ideal. Who doesn't believe that the best example in humanity was the A'immah alayhim salam? Yet their lives were not easy. They were not relaxed. They faced many challenges and difficulties. Why should we be surprised when we face these challenges and difficulties? Which brings us to the third point that we can understand now and logically agree with, that whatever challenges we go through have a benefit and serve a purpose. And the origination of those challenges is not that Allah is doing evil to me, but it is a consequence of the reality that we live in. Then the third question that comes is, why does difficulty and a masa'ib and a problem befall an innocent child? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You see, this is where it conflicts with the intellect. Is that a child is innocent. A child is not wajib al-taqleef. They don't have the responsibility to do good and they'll be rewarded, and if they do bad, they'll be punished. The child doesn't suffer punishment. To the extent where some of the ahkam, the akhlaqiyat that are taught to us, that there are certain things that if an adult does it, it's haram. But if a child does, don't even stop it. I'll give you an example. To use the facilities facing the bathroom, facing the direction of Qibla is haram, not jaiz. But if a child does it, you're not even told to turn him away from that direction. Because that child doesn't have any taklif, there's nothing that's haram for that child. They're innocent. There's no test upon them. As a matter of fact, if a child, for example, and this is haqiqah, and we know this, because this is what our Prophet taught us, that if a child dies before their Majid, they die innocent. And if they die innocent, will they be questioned on the Day of Judgment? No. There's nothing but a reward for them. The child has no shari responsibility. So a child who goes through difficulty, there's no test. There's no punishment. There's no questioning for that child. They're ma'soom. They're simply rewarded for it. You know why our Prophet taught us this? It's because in his time, 2 children went through difficulties. He himself was sahib al-awlad, who passed away in infancy. The example of what is the reward or the test of that child was a relevant question then as it is now. The child has no obligation. As a matter of fact, that child, because of this, there are ahadith that are explained to us that, and this is a book that was written, Sakina fi al-Awlad, that is written by Sheikh. Sheikh, one of the great scholars of Islam, and one of our great teachers in the house of Allah. All of his children died before they became Bani. To the extent where when he became Shaheed, he had one son who was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and he didn't know if this one was going to live either when he was killed. He wrote a book, he collected these ahadith to explain the social concept of how difficult this process is and what the reward is. And he would narrate the ahadith of Ahl-e-Bait to teach us and say that they taught us that Yawm al-Mahshar, when humanity is collected on the Day of Judgment, these innocent children, Allah will instruct them and send malaika to take them to heaven. And these innocent children, when they stand before the door of Jannah, they stop. And the malaika ask, why did you stop? Allah has guaranteed you a reward for this. And they reply and they say, well, what about our parents? And Allah says, you and your parents enter heaven for the musibah. This is an explanation to show that when we see a child go through a difficulty, the child is not the one going through the test. It's the parents, it's the family that are going through the test. Allah explains this in Surah Baqarah. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّهُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Allah says, we will test you in this life. How will we know you're truly believers? We'll test you in this life. No one tells us exactly what He's going to test us. That with fear, hunger, loss of wealth, loss from yourself, what thamarat? Fruit. When Allah uses kalimat al-thamarat in this sentence, He's not literally talking about we'll take your banana away from you. The thamarat of a man is his children. The thamarat of a woman is her children. This is a test for all of us, that in us we are tested through all these means. It may happen that you take away my money, no problem. Give me fear, I'll be okay. Take away from my own health, fill me with disease and difficulty. But my children, when Ibrahim alayhi salam makes the dua that, oh Allah, make my children the coolness of my eyes, the comfort of my soul. It can happen that a man can bear many challenges and difficulties in his life, but this challenge and difficulty, this loss of a child, is Allah testing that, is your iman with me? Or did you lie when you claimed faith? This difficulty of children and this process of a child going through difficulty, it's not about the child being put through a challenge, it's us being put through a challenge. You know the reward is so azim. Sheikh Al-Thani writes in his own book and he cites, he says, ulama, when they would understand the reward that he would receive. He narrates one of the ulama in his dream, he sees that it's the day of judgment and people are suffering, and he says, I too was suffering. But as I was suffering, I saw these young boys with beautiful faces running through the mahshar and giving cold water to certain people. He says, as I saw this, I saw my nephew who was running with this water to see someone. I stopped him, I said, give me some water, I'm your uncle. And the nephew replies, he says, no, this is only for my father who suffered my loss in his life. That alim says, when I woke up and I realized the ultimate of the reward, I too prayed that Allah would make me lose something in this life so that I would receive the benefit of the day of judgment. That's the ultimate of this test. Is the idea that when we see a child suffering, it's the parents who are going through the test. It's the parents whose faith is being questioned. It's the family in its entirety. Sometimes it's our brother, our cousin, our nephew. When we see them suffering in this condition, our own faith comes into question. We begin to question Allah. Why? This is where Allah is saying, did you imagine that you would say you have faith and you wouldn't be tested? And Allah told us where this test is going to come from. Which is one of the conclusions of this is, one, don't pray that you ever go through such a test. There's a discussion that talks about and says, for example, that if you pray for sabr, make a dua to sabr. One man doing tawaf of the Kaaba prays, oh Allah, a'tini with sabr. Imam Sadiq taps him on the shoulder and says, this isn't the dua you want to make. The only way you get patience is by going through trials. If you pray for patience, the only way to get it is going through these difficulties. So the man says, Ya Rasulullah, what should I make dua for? He says, make the dua, Rabbana a'tina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana. And ask Allah for goodness. Ask Allah to remove the difficulties. Ask Allah to give you goodness. Rather, if you want the trial, then that will cause you to go through patience. Don't pray for patience if you don't want to go through the trial. Rather, just ask for khair. Ask for goodness. Be satisfied with what Allah gives us. But understanding this entire concept, that we can now understand and see that even a child who goes through difficulty, even a child, is not that the child himself is being punished, or that the child is earning a reward. No, he's ma'soom. It's the family that's being tested. Now look back and see the sacrifices of Allah, the patience of Imam Hussain. The reward of Imam Hussain is not like the reward of anyone. It is in the patience that he reflected. Sometimes we imagine that the masa'ib of Imam Hussain ended with his shahadat in Karbala, but that's not true. Why? Because when you look back at Rasulullah, and Rasulullah makes the statement, he says, I have been tested like no other Nabi before me was tested. He says, I have faced tribulations that no other Nabi has gone through. Ya Ibn Rasulullah. It's because his trials didn't end with his shahada, but rather the suffering of his family, the suffering of his children were the trials placed upon Rasulullah. A shaheed, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ. Do not imagine that those who are shaheed are dead, rather they are alive with Allah, and those tribulations are still impacting the reward that they receive. That's why the adamat of Abu Abdullah that we talk about is that adamat that did not end in Karbala, but those bala and those difficulties that befell his family, that befell his children, that befell his women, continue to raise his status to a level we can't imagine. Now look and see that how could it be that Allah gives him a daughter that he loves, that sleeps on his chest, that he cares for deeply, and that Allah puts her through trials. This is that night in which they describe and say that this child has been going through these tribulations and difficulties, and that tonight it is that she sees a dream in which she sees her father. Up until now, this small girl has been told that you are separated from your father because he is on a journey. He's on a journey. That's why you can't see him, you can't spend time with him, because he is on a journey visiting a faraway place. The child in this night, it's narrated, awakens and says, "Oh mother, oh aunt, you told me my father is far away, but I have seen him in my dream. Why did you separate me from him? Let me be with my father." Who is that lady that could turn to this child and explain to her that yes, your father is near, but his condition is such that you cannot see him because you could not withstand this difficulty? Remember, it was that the Masa'ib that were placed on Abu Abdullah were such that even he feared the consequence of the children. Yawm Ashura, you remember that in the Amal you paced back and forth 7 times. Why did you pace back and forth 7 times? Because Abu Abdullah in his arms held an infant that was killed so mercilessly that Abu Abdullah was afraid that if the children saw this infant in this condition, they would die from fear of the difficulty. Abu Abdullah 7 times. He wondered, he says, every mother has bid farewell to her sacrifice. Rabab should be given this honor. But if anyone would see the adamat of the sacrifice of Asghar, that they too may die from this difficulty. So Abu Abdullah called out, "Oh Rabab, come out and bid farewell." That mother made one statement on the day of Ashura. May Allah raise her status that box over how difficult her life was. She sees her infant son and asks the question, "Amithluka yanhari Asghar?" That mother now has to answer her daughter, who is begging and crying, "Where is my father? Why have you separated me from him? Why cannot I go to my father? Have you not seen the tribulations I have borne? I want to tell Baba about what has happened to me. Do not separate me from him any longer." Mal'un heard the cries of the innocent. How great that child was crying. The Mal'un hears, he says, "What disturbs my sleep?" They say the child of Hussain cries for him. "Then give her what she desires." They bring a bowl covered with cloth and present it to this orphan child. The description says that the child made one statement, "I did not ask you for food, I asked you for my father." Why is this written in Tarikh? Why? Because they kept these children and these women so hungry and in such difficulty that it is no surprise that they would come and go from consciousness from the challenges that they were facing. They say to this child that it is not food, it is what you have asked for has been presented to you. They describe that the child, hearing this, lifted the cloth from the bowl, found the head of her father in front of her. Tarikh recites that this child made 3 statements, only 3. 1, "Baba, who cut your veins?" The second statement, "Baba, who colored your beard red with your blood?" The third and final statement, "Man aitamani fi sighri sinni." Who is it that has made me an orphan when I am such a young child? Saying this, that child at the separation of her father, they say she touched her lips to her father's lips and was in that condition of still crying, that they said the child became silent in this condition. There was no sound heard. The mother came to rouse the child, could not rouse the child. Zainab roused the child. Zainab could not rouse the child. Sajjad roused the child. Wake your sister. She could not wake. He could not wake the child. Inna lillah. Oh Zainab Abidin, how many times did you call out to Allah? How many times did you call for patience? If the Masa'ib of this child were completed at this point in time, rather they describe and say in this condition, that the women of Sham came who would do the ghusl. Upon seeing the child, they refused to do the ghusl. They said, in her skin is a disease. We do not want the disease to spread amongst the people of Sham. Sayyidah Zainab turned to her nephew. Oh nephew, how do we answer this? Imam Zain al-Abidin replies, oh aunt, her skin has no disease in it. Rather, on the day of Ashura, when her skin was burned, no one gave her to protect her wound. The cloth has grown in with her wounds now. The aunt replies, oh Zain al-Abidin, how shall I do the ghusl of this child? If I was to remove the clothing, then the skin would come off with it. The Madlumiyat of Abu Abdullah. Imam Zain al-Abidin answers, oh aunt, do not remove her clothing. We will bury my sister like this. There are two who went through such a challenging burial that it is hard to describe. One is Amir al-Mu'minin when he buries Fatima al-Zahra. Why? It takes two to bury a person. One to lower the body, and the other to place the body in the lahad and to place them into the grave, into the shelf. But Amir al-Mu'minin was that madloom who had no other mahram for Sayyidah Zahra, that you would imagine him sitting by the grave, wondering, how do I enter the daughter of Rasulullah into a grave? How do I alone take this responsibility? That we imagine and say that the one to assist him would be Rasulullah, who would call and say, Ya Ali, return my amana to me. And Amir al-Mu'mineen would reply, oh Rasulullah, forgive me. When you left your daughter with me, her eye was not injured. Her ribs were not broken. Her muhsin was not killed. The same way we say in Sham, there was Ali ibn al-Hussain with a child alone. But I ask you first, how did Ali ibn al-Hussain dig the grave? His hands were in chains. Ali ibn al-Hussain to return this sister of his, who was there to assist him, to help him lower this body. We would imagine and ask again that Abu Abdullah would be the assistant who would say, oh Zain al-Abidin, return my amana. Now it would be Ali ibn al-Hussain who would call out, Baba, forgive me. Her ears were not burnt. Her cheeks did not bear the marks of the hands of Shimon upon her face. Her body was not burned when you left her with me. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا